In this video, we are going to have a look at loops in Java. And we are going to cover the following topics. First, we'll have an introduction. Then we'll see for, while and do while loops. Then we'll see how to prevent an endless loop. Then we'll have a look at breaking out of a loop. And then how to continue a loop. So, the introduction part, there is just one simple question. Suppose you have to print hello world, say 5 times. So you are going to probably write hello world 5 times. Say system.out.println. I'm using the shortcut sysout. Say you write sysout once, then you write sysout twice, then you write sysout thrice. Suppose you do it 5 times. Now what about I say that do the same, say 505 times? So are you going to sit and write sysout system.out.println hello world 505 times? The simple answer is no. And that is the reason we have loops in Java. So we are going to just see what the loops are. The basic definition of loop is that it is used to repeat statements. Now, having a look at the for loop, when we know, like in the previous example, I told you that print hello world 505 times. For this example, let us use that print the hello world statement 100 times. Now, for loop is basically used when you have to repeat a task a set number of times. The set number of times is, for our example, 100. We already know that we have to print hello world 100 times. And that is where a for loop is used. So don't get confused looking at the syntax right now. Just focus here that we have to print hello world 100 times. What is our print? What is our statement to print hello world once? This is our statement. And we have to make sure this statement repeats 100 times so that we don't have to write that statement 100 times separately. And that is where we use a for loop, which the basic condition of which is to have basically the number of times a task has to be repeated. So it consists of 3 parts. So now we will be talking about the for loop, and it consists of 3 parts. The variable declaration part. Here I say int I is equals to 0. So I created a variable with value 0. Then the next condition is I is less than 100. Is the condition true or false? Currently it is true. And then we add one value to I. So what happens is, the first time when I is equals to 0, if the condition is true, then this particular set of statement, so you can say there are braces here. So whatever statements are in braces are executed. Currently we have this one statement. Now once that statement is executed one time, the flow goes here to I++ and a value is added to I. So I now becomes 1. After this again, this condition is checked. See, the second step is condition and third is the increment statement. So I'll tell you again from the beginning. Initially you declared int I is equals to 0. At that moment, then the condition was checked whether I is less than 100. It is. So execute the statements. Then come back to the increment statement. Increase I by 1. So I is now 1. Is I less than 100? Then again go to the condition. Is I less than 100? Yes, it is. So again execute the statements and go back to the increment part. Do this until this condition becomes false. So I will keep on increasing and there will be a time the value of I will become 100. That is when the statements have already been executed 100 times from 0 to 99. So at that moment 100 is less than 100 will become false, and that is when your loop will exit. So I'm explaining to you this part again. Start with int I is equals to 0, the declaration part. Check whether the condition is true. If it is true, execute the statements. Once the statements are executed, go to the increment operator, increment the value of I, then again check the condition. If the condition is true, repeat the step. Execute the statements, then go to the increment operator. And as soon as the conditions become false, that is when you get out of the loop. So this is our for loop with three conditions: the variable declaration, with three paths: the variable declaration, the condition, and the increment statement. So let us now have a look at the example of a for loop. The question is to print first 100 natural numbers. And then we'll basically modify it to print 100 even natural numbers. So let us start with the first part, printing first 100 natural numbers. So we already know that a certain thing has to be done 100 times. And what is that? A value has to be printed 100 times, and each time the value has to be incremented. So this is a very simple example. You start the for loop, declare int I is equals to 1, I is less than is equals to 100 is your condition, and I plus plus. So it will start with 1, it will print 1, then it will go to the increment operator, it will increase the value of I by 1, I now becomes 2, then it will check whether the condition is true or not. Yes, the condition is true, so it will print I. Similarly, the process will take place till I is less than equal to 100. So the first 100 natural numbers from 1 to 100 will be printed. So now what if we want to print the first 100 even natural numbers? What are the modifications to be made here? First of all, when we start off with even numbers, the first even numbers is 2. So the modification which we will make is we will convert I to 2. And at every step, previously we were adding 1 values like 1, 2, 3. At this point we want to add 2 to each value. So the values which are to be printed are 2, 4, 6. So instead of incrementing by 1, we basically increment by 2. So we write here I plus is equals to 2. Instead of incrementing by 1, we increment by 2. And hence, so let us now see the for loop now. The value of I is 2 initially. So 2 is printed. Then after the statements are executed, it goes to the increment statement and another 2 is added to the value of I, which now becomes 4. So now 4 is printed. Then the condition is checked. So it again the same thing will happen till 100, but only the even numbers will be printed. So here I would like to remind you of the fact that number of repetitions are known when using for. So we basically knew that we had to print say 100 natural numbers or first 100 even natural numbers. Another modification which we need to make to our code is that we need to print first 100 even natural numbers. If we keep the condition as I is less than equal to 100, it will only print first 50 natural numbers. So this is a very simple change, and I know you might have guessed it. We need to just make it to I less than is equals to 200. So then it will print the values from 2 to 200, which are basically the first 100 natural numbers. So we previously saw the for loop where the number of repetitions were known. So what if we don't know how many times a particular set of statements are to be executed, and we just have a condition? So number of repetitions are not known. In that particular case, we use a while loop. So the statements in a while loop are executed while a certain condition is true. So while condition is true, these set of statements starting from here to here will be executed. It is as simple as that. In for, we had to basically tell the number of times a certain, we were kind of indirectly telling the number of times a certain thing has to be executed using the increment statement and the condition and the initialization part, the declaration part. But in while, we just specify a condition and these statements are to be executed until and unless the condition is not false. So let us have a look at an example of the same now. Say we need to find out the factorial of a number 10. We define a variable int counter is equals to 10 and int factorial is equals to 1. So our condition is that while counter is greater than 1, execute these sets of statements. So counter is currently 10. So factorial, this statement will be executed and this statement will be executed. So the value of factorial will become 1 into 10, that is 10. And counter minus minus, so the value of counter will be decreased and it will become 9. So on the subsequent steps, counter is still greater than 1, so again the statements will be executed. Counter is, so factorial will be multiplied by counter, so 10 into 9 will be 90, and again counter will be decreased by a value 1. So the steps will keep on happening till the condition is true. So counter will become 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When it becomes 1, 1 is greater than 1 becomes false. But by that time we'll have the value of factorial to be something like 3662880, which is the factorial of 10. So basically what happened was that until this condition was true, these statements were executing. And this time, in this case, we knew that it will execute 10 times looking at the value of counter. But usually in the case when while is used, it may not be necessary that you know number of repetitions. You just specify a condition, and if that condition is true, the statements are executed. And suppose a question to you, if I do while true and write a set of statements here, what will happen? Keep thinking about it. We'll come back to this in some time. The next loop which we are going to see is the do while loop. This is very similar to the while loop, except that the statements are executed at least once. In while, the statements were only executed if the condition was true. So if the first time the condition was false, then not even once the statements would be executed. But there are cases when we want at least